This is Seth David from the world-famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about, is Intuit telling small businesses to fire their accountants? It's been a while, and I haven't been putting much out on the Nerd Enterprises channels this year because I've been busy over here at schoolofbookkeeping.com trying to create newer and even better resources for accountants, bookkeepers, and small business owners to take advantage of. In fact, if you haven't already, you've got to come and check this out. I just launched a new course as of the time I'm recording this, and this one's actually free. You don't have to be a paid subscriber to access this course. Just come right over here onto the courses page and click right over here on course SA2, which is standalone number 2. It's called How to Calculate Business Valuation in the Shark Tank. And there's even a free Excel template included in the course, which you can download, and as I said, it's free. Now, the topic of today's discussion or video or post or whatever you want to call it is Intuit telling small businesses to fire their accountants? This came up in our weekly hangout last week. As of the time I'm recording this, everything should be qualified with that. As of the time I'm recording this. Social media is a timeline, right? Things happen in order. I can look and see the most recent posts are on the top. I mean, how much time do we spend with our mobile devices going like this? Right, because we're trying to get to the top and see what's the most recent. So everything I say should be sort of heard and understood with that, theory in mind, that everything's based on when I'm saying this and recording this. So a week before the time, less than a week before the time I'm recording this, we had a hangout, and it came up that a few people in our circles had been sharing this article that was going around on Google Plus, and making this claim that well, here it is, that accountants are not part of the Intuit's roof repair for the future. And that's a quote out of an article on Fortune that where Brad Smith, the CEO of Intuit, was talking about. He made a quote saying that the best time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. And so the tech accountant here is kind of pulling that out of the context of that article and putting it into the context of the message that these guys want to convey, which is really what all the fire is all about now, because everybody's up in arms like, oh my God, is Intuit telling people to fire their accountants because QuickBooks Online is going to make it so easy for small business owners to do their own bookkeeping and accounting that they don't need their accountants anymore? This was the question and the concern that got raised. And based on that, coming up this coming Friday, which will be October 17th, 2014 at 8 a.m. when we do our weekly hangout, we're going to actually have somebody from Intuit, possibly Chris Repetto, if not somebody else who Chris will help arrange for us to have, addressing this concern, this question that got raised. Now, I want to address it for now myself, because I did, of course, take these concerns up directly with Allison Ball, who's in charge of the global influencer programs at Intuit as of now, and then Chris Repetto got sort of tagged into the conversation. And I've written this post, which you can read, and I encourage you to read, because I think it's really important. I think there's a few important things that we need to talk about here. And before I really get into them, I want to back up for a minute. This might be a long video, but it's been a while, so I'm making up for lost time. When I started consulting, I started Nerd Enterprises before it was even incorporated in 2003 as a sole proprietor at DBA. And during that time, I had an important decision to make. I was actually consulting with companies initially, doing stuff in Microsoft Excel for them, designing templates and forms and tweaking, massaging data, whatever I needed to in order to get people the information that they needed out of their spreadsheets. In fact, one of my first gigs was an interesting one. It was a guy who was running for office city council of Beverly Hills. Eventually, he became the mayor of Beverly Hills. And it was massaging data in Excel for him because he was trying to see who out of his known supporters had voted. Obviously, he couldn't tell who they voted for, but he knew who his supporters were, and he could get reports each day telling him who had voted, so that he knew which of his supporters had not yet voted, and based on that, his campaign people could make phone calls and remind people to go and vote. It's a very clever strategy. And I helped him organize the spreadsheets that we used to sort of massage the data so that he could get this information out of what was provided. So the point being that I started out consulting in Excel because I had a skill that I knew people needed. It addressed a need that was out there. The time eventually came when I said I should consult in QuickBooks because I'm an accountant. I know accounting. I didn't really know the QuickBooks software anymore. I had used it years before that when it was the DOS version. So I knew it was very different because now everything was Windows and, much later on. So I made the decision to, consult in QuickBooks, and I went out in 2004 and bought my first copy of QuickBooks. I still have the discs in my my other home office that is no longer a home office, and I started learning how to use it and started working with clients who were using it. I still wasn't using it for my own accounting. For myself, I had developed a system in Excel. It was part of the challenge of doing it, and also I just liked doing it in Excel. Eventually, I did put my own company on QuickBooks. Now, why QuickBooks? What made me decide to use QuickBooks back then? It was really a simple choice. I started asking around and doing a little research, and it became pretty quickly apparent that most companies most small businesses used QuickBooks for their accounting software. So if I was going to go out there and consult in something, and considering I didn't know anything other than the very large GL packages that I had used in my previous jobs, which didn't apply here, it meant I had to learn something new. So which thing was I going to go out there and spend my time learning? Well, it made sense. I should learn the thing that gives me the greatest possible opportunity. In other words, the greatest exposure to the greatest number of people who use that tool that I'm going to learn how to use so I can provide the consulting. And of course, that equaled QuickBooks in those days. And if I was starting out today, it would probably still be the same decision. Are there other alternatives? And this is a discussion that recently came up in our Facebook group here, Accountants, Bookkeepers, and Business Owners. Somebody asked the question, should I go deep and just do QuickBooks, or should I learn to use other accounting software and plan on being able to provide services in those areas to people? Well, my answer is yes. And I say that and I pause jokingly because the truth is, yes, some people should just do QuickBooks and nothing else because that's how they're wired and that works better for them, to just learn one thing and learn it really well and go deep with it. For other people, perhaps people more like myself, it makes more sense to learn a few things, if not a lot of different things. Now, the argument is, well, then you're going to know a lot of things a little bit and not go real deep with them. And I'm going to call you out on that because there's nothing that could be further from the truth. I can speak from my own direct experience, but I can learn a lot of different things, certainly a handful of different things, and go deep with every single one of them, especially when it comes to accounting software, because I have the accounting fundamental knowledge. So I know what I need to be able to get the software to do. The software is just that. It's just software. Then it's just a matter of learning how to get it to do the things I know I need to be able to get it to do, which ultimately translates in our world to getting a proper balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and statement of cash flows, among other reports. So we had this conversation, and it kind of comes back full circle into this question because, in 2004, I made that decision to consult using QuickBooks. And during that time, during the time since that, I learned of the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, and I joined it initially, and I'm always very honest about this. I only joined it because I got the software included in that cost. And the reason I'm highlighting this and underscoring this is because they have a Pro Advisor program. It's aimed at helping accountants to better provide services. Intuit is not stupid. They know that by giving us the power to have better access to their tools, that they're going to sell more copies of QuickBooks to people who use it, because those people are going to come to people like me and say, what software should I use? And I'm going to say QuickBooks. I'm going to say QuickBooks for a number of reasons. Is it perfect? Are there problems? Do people complain about it? Of course they do, all the time. Depending on how specific you're trying to get with it and what you're trying to get it to do, you're going to run into limitations. You're going to run into things that it's not, where the built-in design to do the thing you're trying to do is not there. So there's always going to be people complaining. But that's going to be true of any software, not just QuickBooks. There's no software out there that solves every possible accounting problem anybody could ever have. The reason I would suggest QuickBooks first and foremost before any others is because you have the most available support. You have the most people like me who have made the decision to provide people with support and consulting in QuickBooks because it's the most widely used. Now, are there others? Yes. Let's face it, Xero is a very compelling alternative to QuickBooks. Lots of people use it, and for that reason, I have made a decision myself in my own practice to make sure that I'm familiar with Xero, and I do have some clients who use Xero, and I have provided training services in that. So that's a decision we have to make as practitioners. Do we just want to use one and go deep? For some people, the answer is going to be absolutely yes. Do we want to learn to use others as well so that we can open up more doors and bring in other streams of revenue? Can I go as deep with Xero as I can with QuickBooks and learn both products equally well? I think so. But maybe others can't. Maybe others would feel like that's a distraction. That's a personal decision everybody has to make for themselves. And everybody's different, so there's no one blanket answer that fits everybody for every situation. Back to QuickBooks, though, and what Intuit is or isn't doing as a company. Are they telling businesses to fire their accountants? No, that's ridiculous. Nothing could be further from the truth. And as you'll read in my article, and I'm not going to sit here reading my article to you, you'll see my points that I make, and you'll see the feedback that I've gotten directly from people at Intuit. They have so many programs built specifically around supporting and promoting accountants and their businesses and what they do, that to say that Intuit is launching a campaign telling people to fire their accountants is the most ridiculous thing ever. But I'm not going to ask you to take my word for it. I've scheduled a hangout based specifically on this news that came out and spread around the internet, and I use the term news very broadly because I like to think of the term news as being something that's in reference to something that's factual, where the facts have been checked and interpreted properly. And I don't believe that's the case here. The article in question is linked in the blog post that you're seeing this video with. It's right here on CloudWedge. I don't believe it was the author's intention to mislead people. I believe it was people misinterpreting what the author did here, because he put or she put their comment on the heels of a quote from Brad Smith, which almost leads you to believe, and then the way the post here on Google Plus is framed, it really leads you to believe that this was a quote from Brad Smith if you're not paying attention. So I make the point in the article, with great power comes great responsibility. That's a famous quote, and it applies here. Social media gives us great power. We have to be so careful about how we use it. A lot of people in a very quick, short period of time misinterpreted what was going on here, what this post was saying, and what the article that was being linked to was saying, which was making further reference to an article on Fortune, which I believe is linked here, yes, about the annual briefing that Brad Smith, the CEO of Intuit, recently gave. And so what we've got here is a classic game of telephone that by the time it got here to Google Plus was grossly misinterpreted. And to me, this is irresponsible at best. You have to be so careful about the message you put out there. And for those who shared this post on Google Plus, you have to be really careful that what you're sharing is something that you've checked out yourself. We all have a very bad habit. We read a headline, it sounds interesting, and so we click retweet or share, and we don't check it out for ourselves. I've been guilty of that. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I'm more and more conscious of it and careful about that as time goes on. These days, it's pretty rare I'll share something unless I've actually taken the time to go read it myself. Because remember, the minute you share it in front of your audience, then that becomes a reflection on you. You are sharing information and telling people, I agree with this, or I believe in this, or I think this is interesting. And those people are going to see that you've shared it, and because they're interested in what you have to say, they might take it to heart. And if they later find out that they were misled because you shared it, because you didn't take the time to check the facts yourself and make sure that the article was being framed in the proper context, then that can boomerang back on you, and it can actually hurt you or even be detrimental to your brand. So let's all please be really careful about what we do in social media. Let's be responsible. Let's check facts. Let's make sure that we're being very clear, crystal clear about what message we're sending out there, especially when we're talking about things that other people, quote unquote, have said or done. As always, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. More than welcome to take your questions and comments. Please post them below. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day again, and I look forward to seeing you on the web.